So the deeper reason why we compulsively overeat is generally because we are trying to numb or we're trying to soothe or cope with a particular emotion that we just don't know how to sit with. Are you ready to bring your dream body and health into life, but just can't seem to keep the motivation going? And is it finally time to address the self-sabotage and the unwanted eating behaviors such as binge eating, emotional eating, and nighttime eating that you know are getting in the way of your goals? Do you ever wonder what it would take for you to feel in control of your rituals so that you can stay consistent and see results? Welcome to this week's special Make Peace with Food minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, where you'll learn how to overcome unwanted eating behavior and other self-sabotaging habits by shifting your nervous system so that your body works with you instead of against you. I'm your host, Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food and find food and body freedom so that struggle with weight is a thing of the past. When you tune in every Thursday on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, you'll catch the latest conversation on unwanted eating behaviors and learn how to shift the nervous system, rewire the brain to new patterns, and end the food and body obsession so you finally feel relaxed and no longer confused around food. Now, before we begin, I want to quickly invite you to grab a free copy of my Food Freedom ebook that I have for you at makepeacewithfood.com. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then I also want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook community at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly. The links are in the show notes. And of course, if you know somebody who you feel could benefit from these conversations and discussions, make sure to share this podcast with them too. All right, athletes, now let's get into it. I want to share with you a really funny story. It's not so funny. It didn't really feel very funny while it was happening, but now that I look back at it, it's a little bit funny. So if you are listening to audio, you can't see this. And so I'm just going to share with you what's going on. But right now, on my nose, I've got a little bit of a scratch here. I think that you can see that. You can't really see super well on camera, but you may see here on my forehead that I also have a contusion. And so last Sunday, I thought it was a great idea to go running in the rain. And I don't know if you love this, but it's like one of my favorite things. Summer rain is like, it's just beautiful. It's warm and it's refreshing. And so I decided what a great idea it would be to go for a run in the trails in the rain. And so I put on my cap, I got all my rain gear going, and I got my shoes going. And then I headed out into the trails, which, by the way, I know like the back of my hands. Like, I'm in these trails all the time. But of course, it just happened to be, and I'm in Montreal, Canada, by the way, we've had crazy storms like this last week. It's been really, really weird weather. It's like beautiful for a moment, and all of a sudden it's windy and it's crazy. And I know there were tornadoes in different parts of the world. And so I guess we're getting the aftermath of that. But here I am running in the trails, and my greatest occupation at this moment is to not trip over the rocks and the roots. It's super muddy, it's wet, it's slippery. And so I have my little cap on, and as I'm running, I'm just looking down at my feet. And then before I know it, I feel a big thump in my face. And what I had actually done is I ran right into a fallen tree. And so the tree was kind of leaning over on the trails. It wasn't there the day before, so I think the wind must have knocked it over, and I didn't see it, and I just ran right into it, and the branch was like literally the size of my face. And so I felt super silly. And of course, my first thing is like, oh my God, who saw that? And then after that, I just made my way home, and I've actually had like a mild headache since. And I used to work with sports teams for years, and I've diagnosed tons of concussions. So I know it's probably something around those lines. So all this to say is we are all clumsy at times, and look up when you're running. Even though you recognize the trail and you're very familiar with it, anything can happen. Let's go ahead and get into our discussion today and really understand what the deeper reason behind why we overeat is. And so if you've been in this space for a while and you're struggling with weight, and when I say struggling with weight, I want you to imagine a struggle with more than 10 pounds. If we're really struggling with our weight, It is this fluctuation of something greater than 10 pounds. It could be 30 pounds up, 40, 50, 60, maybe even 100, and then back down. And so that is what we call a true struggle with weight, because it's actually quite normal throughout the year to kind of diverge with your weight in terms of, let's say, a 10-pound range. It'll be normal for you to go up a few pounds, come down a few pounds. And if you still have a menstrual cycle, it's completely normal also to experience that during the month. If you notice it's winter and maybe you tend to move a little bit less because you're living in a very cold place, or maybe you're retaining water also during these winter months, that could also be the reason. So if you're within a 10-pound weight gain or weight loss generally, and you're sort of in that range, that's not a major struggle. But if you're noticing that there's this constant on the wagon or off the wagon, there's this constant going to the extreme of one end and then the other end, then that's really more of a call to attention that there is something greater going on. And now diet culture, of course, tells us, hey, Sherry, get disciplined. Come on. You just have to move more. You have to eat less. Like, just get with it. Like, what's your problem? Like, discipline yourself. Have some self-control. And anyone struggling with emotional eating or binge eating know that that's the most ridiculous comment and statement. Obviously, if I was able to just stop it, I would have stopped it. So there's clearly a reason why I haven't. And the reason, of course, is the nervous system, which we always talk about. And I always want to remind you of this because I want to take away the fault. I want you to take away that sense of self-responsibility that maybe there's something wrong with you, that you're not trying hard enough, that you don't want it badly enough. And it's actually none of those things. So the deeper reason why we compulsively overeat is generally because we are trying to numb, or we're trying to soothe or cope with a particular emotion that we just don't know how to sit with. And why don't we know how to sit with this emotion? Well, it oftentimes stems from childhood, or it stems from certain life experiences where we were likely told, hey, we don't cry here, suck it up, life is already hard. Or maybe you were in an environment where you didn't have that emotional acceptance, or maybe even that space to be vulnerable with around parents. Maybe your parents were even absent. And as we have these conversations, by the way, I want to share that the goal here is not to blame our parents. It's not to point blame at circumstances. It's simply to understand without judgment why this is going on. If we did not have an emotionally validating environment at any time of our life, we had to learn what to do with this emotion. An emotion is just energy in motion. It's just energy. And if you know what energy looks like, if you've ever looked at a graph of energy, or my God, even back in pre-calculus or calculus when we were learning sine waves and cosine waves, remember it was a wave. There was a upward inflection and then a downward inflection, and it was a constant pattern of up and down. And emotion is the same way. Of course, when we experience an emotion, we're in the up. So let's say it's regret, or let's say it's sadness or loss, or it's fear. With the moment we feel it, it's really up, and we're like, oh, and we're in that state where we're thinking that this pain is so intense, this discomfort is so intense. And because we don't actually allow it to pass through us by either numbing it, storing it, avoiding it, or using something to cope with that feeling, then we tend to just trap that emotion. And what we've done over time is we've never really learned the tools to actually release this emotion, to actually cope with this emotion. And so some of these emotions that I'm sharing right now are very, very intense. And by the way, I do want to add here that one of the most common emotions that we actually have a hard time sitting with is boredom. Yeah, it's boredom. Because boredom is one of those emotions where, okay, I don't know what to do with myself. Like, I got to busy myself. And we live in this society where it's very do, go, and we're very much judged for that. And if we're not doing something, then we're needing something to do. So we have to busy ourselves with our fingers, with our mouth, with our phone, with our eyes. We maybe call somebody. And so we actually have a hard time just sitting there and doing nothing. And so what's really also important to note is that every single one of these emotions that I shared that may bring you to compulsive overeating or binge eating or emotional eating is going to be very relative to the person. So your particular emotion may be boredom, while somebody else, it may be sadness, or for someone else, it might be stress or worry. And so I want you to get very, very particular around which one it is for you. But the real deeper reason behind why we tend to overeat is because we don't know how to sit in these emotions. And we tend to think that they're just going to be there forever. If we've lost somebody that we love, and I have shared with you the story so many times when I lost my mom, that was probably the peak height of any strong emotion I've ever experienced in my life. It was great sadness, it was great remorse, it was mourning, it was a lot of different emotions happening at the same time, and almost also a sense of peace and happiness and joy for her because she ended the suffering that she was going through for so many years. And so there was all these mixed emotions, but my goodness, was it intense. And although I thought I was coping with these emotions at the time, what I actually was doing was numbing them. So that was a time in my life where I was really getting onto my spiritual path and I was trying to be very accepting. But what I didn't realize is that the part of the acceptance is actually feeling these emotions. I wasn't doing that. I was actually distracting myself. So every time I felt sad or I wanted to cry, I was like, nope, nope, nope. I've accepted it. I'm not going to deal with it. And so I would just find myself getting busy doing something else. And that stayed with me for a long time, and it actually drove a lot of my behavior. That was also the time in my life where I had the worst health issues. I actually had the worst gut health issues ever, and I did not know how to overcome them until I finally dealt with the loss of my mom. And so I want you to just take a moment here and reflect. What could really be behind these unwanted emotions? What could really be behind maybe this fear to experience them? So I know we're talking about eating behavior, but let's just take a one step back and talk about these emotions. What is it behind these emotions that feel like we can't handle them? And so is it fear that they'll just stay there forever? Is it fear that if we allow ourselves to feel stressed, we'll be stressed forever? Is it fear that we don't know what that emotion might actually physically do to us? Because perhaps on a very unconscious level, we feel like if we stay in the stress or we stay in this sadness, like someone just broke up with us or we just heard some really bad news, and if we actually stay in this emotion, could it actually harm us? So getting into that understanding of the why and really getting curious around why we're doing what we're doing instead of judging what we're doing is going to be our way out. Normally, we just judge ourselves. We just kind of turn off, we go numb, we go through the cycle, we're overeating, and then only after the fact do we look back and say, oh my God, why did I do that? I can't believe I did that. What's wrong with me? And we go through all that self-sabotaging talk in the head, and we self-deprecate, and we put ourselves down, and we talk really, really, really nasty to ourselves. And so instead of judging, what if we actually approach it with a sense of love and curiosity? Sherry, why did you do that? What was behind that? What were you feeling? And then start to notice the patterns. Okay, every time you're feeling this, you're tending to do that. And what would happen if I actually just allowed myself to sit in that emotion? What would happen? Because remember, it's a wave. Energy is energy that is going to continue to travel, that's going to continue to move. It's not stagnant. And there is an upward inflection and a downward inflection. And if I'm feeling the intensity right now, if I just sit with it, by breathing, by trying to relax, by trying not to avoid it, not turn on the TV, not call a friend, not just sit in that emotion and just breathe and breathe. And this is where now one of the tools that we teach and make peace with food starts to come in, diaphragmatic breathing. And there's so much power in breath work. It's the big buzz right now. Everyone's talking about breath work, even though this has been ancient conversations and magical tools to really help us restore our nervous system. And why breath is so important is because when we are in protection mode, that means when the body is geared up for survival, which is when we experience an unwanted emotion, all of a sudden our breathing changes. We start breathing more shallow. We're breathing up here. We're feeling tense. Our body starts to tense up. We're like, think about what would happen if suddenly there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing you, or you feel there's a sudden threat and you have to run as quickly as possible. Like there's a tree in front of you and you're trying to avoid it. You're going, you're breathing super shallow. But when we diaphragmatically breathe, when we calm our breath down, really expanding through the belly, and these are one of the techniques that we teach in our program, then you can actually start to shift your nervous system and you can actually start to feel that emotion passing by, whether again, that's boredom or stress or anxiety or any of the things that tend to drive you to self-sabotage. Remember that it's not about the food. It is not about the food. It's about the nervous system, and it's about what's really, really deeply here behind the unwanted eating behavior. What is driving the actual overeating is that tendency for us to avoid, to numb, to really avoid dealing with the things that maybe we now need to address. And so if this is something that resonates with you, if any of these things that I shared with you today has struck a chord somehow, I really, really want you to reach out and find out what could be behind the unwanted eating behavior. Now, there are many different ways that we can share with you to help you join Make Peace with Food. First of all, though, we want to know if you are a right fit or not. If there is a nervous system issue involvement, we want to know, and then Make Peace with Food can work for you. If it's something else, then we'll also let you know, and then we'll offer you other strategies to help you get on your journey. But either way, go ahead and schedule that call. Grab your 30-minute spot. Let's find out if that's the thing. If it's the nervous system this whole entire time, but we've been going about it through dieting and restricting and going back on Weight Watchers and off of Weight Watchers, and it's just been this constant journey. Let's get to the bottom of this. And you really can overcome binge eating and emotional eating in 6 months or less. It is guaranteed, and it happens every single time if you follow the steps that we share and you really focus on the nervous system and stop judging yourself for the behavior that you are, I know, not really wanting to be doing right now. So with that said, go ahead and reserve your spot. And remember, I'm always a resource for you. As I shared, there are many different ways to join the program in a way that suits your budget, that suits your need, and more importantly, your level of support. So I will see you here next week. And if you have any questions, let's reach out to the team and let's see how we can get them answered. You've got this. Thank you for listening to this week's Make Peace with Food minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast. If this has resonated with you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, then please share this episode with them. Let's work together to help as many people as possible make peace with food and fall in love with fitness. And by the way, I need to mention that if you rate and review this podcast on iTunes and send over the screenshot to Sherry at sherryshaban.com, you'll receive a $500 voucher to join me at one of my upcoming retreats or to use it in our Make Peace with Food coaching program. And don't forget to visit myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com to join the free Facebook group for more resources. And remember, athlete, you are an inspiration. I cannot wait to hear your story.